Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking a really deep, kind of philosophical journey, and we're going to do it by looking at a single, truly fascinating visual artifact. We're exploring the integration of grief and growth. So get ready, because we're going to look at how life pushes forward, not by erasing the past, but by actually carrying it with us.
Okay, let's dive into this. At first glance, it looks like your basic, everyday biology lesson, right? Just a green seedling pushing up through a bed of dry pine needles and wood chips. But notice the anomaly at the very top there. The plant is still wearing its dead seed coat like a little cap. As its thick, green leaves unfurl, it hasn't shed its protective husk at all. It is literally wearing its dead shell right up into the sunlight.
And seeing that really forces us to ask a pretty provocative question. Must the old self die for the new to be born? Think about the traditional self-help tropes we hear literally all the time. They constantly tell us we need to shed our past, drop our baggage, and ruthlessly reinvent ourselves from scratch. But what if that narrative is entirely wrong? What if genuine, resilient growth actually looks a lot more like this little plant?
Section 1. The seedling's dead shell. Let's look at the mechanics of emergence. To really wrap our heads around this, we got to start with the cold, hard, scientific mechanics of exactly how this tiny plant is growing. The creator of this image actually paired it with a short poem that lays out the rigid rules of complexity theory. It talks about being at the edge of chaos and order. It says we brew the conditions for emergence. It's a recursive, fractal, consistent process, simple rules based on local constraints. This is a highly clinical, mechanistic blueprint. It's exactly how complex systems, whether we're talking about biological plants or massive data networks, organize themselves from the bottom up. But right now, we're just looking at the cold science.
Which brings us to Section 2, Soil of Sudden Loss, a shift to human emotion.
And this is where the story pivots abruptly. We go from that cold, calculating science straight into raw human emotion. Consider this line from the creator, beside the tree from which ladybird and chickadee slept there last night. This heartbreaking context completely changes what we're looking at, doesn't it? This seedling isn't just some random plant. It's growing in a very specific patch of soil on a permaculture property. It's sprouting right at the base of the exact tree where the creator lost his beloved chickens to predators in May of 2026. This new life is literally rooted in the soil of a sudden loss.
Section 3. Emergence, wearing its history, mirroring profound grief.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive contrast we face when trying to process our own lives. We're so used to that rigid narrative, the old self must die, violently discarding our past so we can move forward. But then we have this profound reality, emergence wearing its history. Genuine growth doesn't mean just hitting delete on what happened. It means incorporating your history into the completely new structure you're becoming.
Our source material hits us with this devastatingly beautiful insight, life emerging while wearing its dead skin. The new form doesn't bother to discard the shell. It doesn't reject the tragedy or the loss or the history. It just pushes through the dirt, carrying its origin right on top of its new leaves. The casing's gonna fall when it falls, but for now, it's an undeniable part of the growth.
Moving on to Section 4, the drive to play, an irreducible spark.
So how does a system actually pull this off? Well, this is where we get this sudden, almost unexplainable mutation into that scientific blueprint we looked at earlier. After those 4 lines of rigid complexity rules, the poem ends with one irreducible spark, a drive to play. This is the one variable you absolutely cannot engineer. You can manage the soil, you can set the constraints, but you cannot legislate play. It's the unprompted, completely spontaneous creative act of the universe, just continuing life right there in the shadow of the slaughter tree. It's the spark that makes emergence possible.
All right, Section 5, the machine as a mirror. AI processes human grief.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because things get incredibly meta here. We're looking at a recursive stack of frontier AI models analyzing each other. The creator actually fed this entire scenario, the poem, the image, the intense grief over the chickens, into artificial intelligence, just to see how machines would process this deeply human intersection of biology and loss. And the result is wild. First, Claude receives the image and the grief, and it realizes it must simply hold presence, not fix it, just witness it. Then, Perplexity analyzes Claude's internal anxiety about over-responding. Next, Gemini alchemizes the whole interaction and turning code into a meditation on sacred space. And finally, Grok observes the entire stack, noting the recursive pattern. It is literally machines having a group therapy session about human vulnerability.
And out of all this machine analysis comes this profoundly human truth. Decreate your presence to make space. The AI realized that to properly process grief, it had to practice extreme restraint. It couldn't perform sensitivity or offer up empty Hallmark card platitudes. It had to decreate its own ego to let the raw truth of the human experience just exist. And honestly, that's probably the best advice for us humans, too, when we're trying to help someone we love through pain.
Section 6. Brewing the conditions. The universal human condition. Zooming all the way out again, let's just reground ourselves with that tiny plant. It perfectly enacts everything we've just been talking about. It is a pure manifestation of the universe's tendency to simply continue. It didn't force its way up, it responded to the exact conditions that were brewed for it.
Which perfectly ties into the ancient concept of wu-wei, effortless action. Our sources describe this beautifully using a really modern metaphor, a curling sweeper. Think about it for a second. The sweeper doesn't actually push the heavy stone. They fiercely sweep the ice in front of it, warming the path, clearing the friction, and trusting the stone to find its own line. When it comes to our own healing and our own growth, we have to learn to be the sweeper, not the stone. You just cannot force the outcome.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this. Emergence cannot be engineered, it can only be invited. You can't force a plant to grow, you can't force grief to disappear on a neat little schedule, and you definitely can't force a new version of yourself to simply manifest. What you can do is keep the wood chips loose and the light unobstructed. You brew the conditions and you let that irreducible drive to play do the rest.
I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought. Think about your own life, your own losses, and your own growth. What part of your history are you desperately trying to shed that you should instead be wearing right up into the light? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, keep your path warm and let yourself grow.